Hello everyone, Jonathan Alfonso. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to go over an article that came out in Buzzfeed talking about how many homeowners are rethinking their decision. They feel house poor. Effectively, they are regretting their decision to buy a home. Now, first of all, as I dive into this, I understand this is from BuzzFeed, so I really don't know. One of my things is on Apple News. I usually get my feed, and one of the things I'm set up for is real estate articles. So I saw this, and this is not a conversation I frequently have with all the buyers we have helped in the last 2.5 years. So I wanted to read the article to understand it. And in reading in the article, I saw so many mistakes and so many things that came up. So I wanted to provide those to you. So when you're out there and you're buying a home, you can see some of the red flags that I even see in some of these stories, and then we can kind of just have a conversation about it. So as I go through these examples from the article, please leave me your comments down below. I really want to hear your thoughts on if you bought a home, how you feel about it, and some of the comments that I'm going to make with regards to some of these stories. So that being said, let's jump into it. So the article starts out with the story of Miss Riggins, right? And they tell her story how she was renting, her rent was being increased, and effectively she met with a realtor to buy a home. Now, just based on the facts that you're able to get from her story, listen, what has happened to this woman is horrible, and I understand that a lot of people are going through this, but they mentioned in the article that she was basically going from an $800 payment, and she decided to get herself into a $1,500 mortgage. Now, one of the red flags in there that I see is that apparently her realtor had advised her to go out and get a second job so you can afford this home. Off the bat, one of the main things is, and we always tell people, a lot of people get so fixated on the price, like you need to look at your monthly payments and your monthly obligations and decide whether you feel comfortable with it. Most of the people that we have helped, usually their payment for what their housing was compared to what their payment for their housing will be after they buy a new home, especially if they were a renter, they try to stay in that same range. So plus or minus, I would say at $800, you'd probably be talking plus or minus $200, I would say maybe $1,000 is what she should have gotten. She effectively went from $800 to $1,500. She nearly doubled her payments, and I absolutely agree. This was a bad decision for her, but I can't, go into all the particulars, but usually you want to kind of do your monthly assessment and make a decision from there. I think it's horrible what's happened to this woman, but anybody will tell you it's bad financial advice for you if your income has stayed the same to decide to double all your expenses. And listen, I will absolutely agree in this situation. Now, it's the other situations that they start to bring up in the article where I really start to question it. The second story they cover is a man named TJ. The reason I want to go into TJ's example is because one of the important things that I tell people is you need to hire a reputable inspector, and you kind of need to know this ahead of time. All too often, I see people, they go under contract, they already start picturing themselves in the home, and they haven't decided who they're going to use as an inspector, and you need to have that ready. And far too often, I see people make the mistake of they hire their friend, or they have a buddy who's a GC, and then they're now making a $500,000 purchase, but they want to save $700 on the inspection. So you want to have a really good inspector, and look at TJ's example so you can see why. TJ buys a home, and apparently his inspection report had said that the roof was going to be $12,000 to $17,000 to fix, and they ended up spending $65,000 to fix the roof. Number one, this doesn't make any sense because roofs are one of those things that they're going to be a square foot cost based on the size of the roof. So for the cost to be 5 times what it was, maybe TJ can reach out to me, but I am speculating here that maybe what the inspector was referencing is repairs to the roof. For example, something that I see typically in my area is you'll have a lot of older houses that had additions. So you'll have a part of the roof that has a pitch, and then you may have a flat roof portion. Often that flat roof portion is not very well maintained, needs additional care, and a lot of times needs repairs. So you will see that in there. But for his expense to be 5 times what it was, either the inspector completely missed the ball, or TJ, instead of doing some repairs, decided, you know what, he went for the Mac Daddy of roofs and put a brand new roof, because on a $500,000 home, which is what I believe he purchased, to put a $67,000 roof, he must have put, top of the line. Obviously, I'm assuming some sort of aluminum roof, but, that just doesn't kind of jive. The next thing is TJ is complaining about his interest rate because it went to 4.9%, because when they had been looking, I'm assuming it had been lower. Now, when I bought my first home in 2016, I bought it at 4.75. So for someone to buy at 4.9 is not really that far out of the realm. So I don't see anything out of of the ordinary here. You do have to understand with homes, you're going to have some big expenses, but with that also comes the ability to have appreciation and value. The third story that they chronicle is a woman named Sarah. Now, Sarah bought a home in Westchester County for $670,000. They knew they were going to have to put in a new kitchen, and when they got in there, they found the situation worse. This is the next thing that I always tell individuals when they're buying a home, which is whatever you're estimating for repairs, people always tend to go on the very low end because of, their friend, or they have a buddy, or, they're analyzing it or they're eyeballing it. Whatever it is, you can almost always count on it being double. This is a perfect example. They estimated $40,000. It ended up being $80,000. Now they're saying, well, we're cash poor. Here's the interesting thing. These people bought this home in March of 2020. They're reaching out to Buzzfeed. They're telling this horror story of how they bought their home. But everybody, and I know a lot of people have this, is, this recency bias of the issue they just went through, but then they also don't discuss everything else that happened, which is they also bought in mid 2020. I'm pulling it up here now. I found another home comparable nearby, and you can see that in Westchester County, homes had appreciated, pretty much on average 20 to 30%. A home that was bought for $670,000 in Westchester County and now has a brand new kitchen. All right, I have to imagine is probably worth about 1.1 in that market. Now, forget about that. Let's just even say that it's worth approximately $950, okay? And they've only gotten $250,000. They bought it for $670. They invested $80 and they're in for $750, and now they have $200,000 of equity. If they put in $80 to get back $240, or they're all in for $750 and it's now worth $950, that's a business decision. And if you made a business decision, if I told you, hey, listen, if you put in an additional $40, I'm gonna make you $200, would you take it? Any business person would make that decision. So the fact that they've done that, and in my opinion, if they have an $80,000 kitchen, the house is probably worth a lot more than $900, given what I saw for a comparable home in that market. They have all that additional equity in their home. So even if prices come off their highs by 10%, they still have a couple $100,000 in there. So listen, is it unfortunate that the expenses were higher than they thought? Yes. But does this happen to a lot of people? Yes. And did they still make a lot of money? Yes. So, let's not sit here and make it seem like, if these individuals are in a tough spot, they would still have the ability to sell and downsize from $1 million home and maybe relocate. I'm not saying they need to do that. I'm just saying it's very difficult for us to read an article and make it seem like this is the end of the world. The fourth individual in the story is one that I saw all the time in the last couple of months and years, and thankfully has kind of died down, which is the story of this individual named Garland. And Garland purchased the home sight unseen. This is one of the things that has became very rampant since the pandemic, where people were like, you know what, I just need to get a home, and they didn't want to see it. And whether I was a listing agent or I was their buyer's agent, I was definitely against it, especially when it came to a single family home. It is always my opinion that if this is something that you are buying to live in, all right, and you are going to live in there, then I am going to want you to tour that home unless you are absolutely familiar with the property type. For example, maybe it's a condominium where they're all going to be the same, or you have lived in that neighborhood and you knew that house like the back of your hand. I myself bought an investment property. I put 0 days inspection, never walked it because I knew exactly what that product would look like. But if you're a homeowner, and especially this individual Garland who was relocating, they needed to go walk this property, and that is a big mistake that I see. Because one of the things that I always tell people is, when I go out there, you watch these videos and you get an idea for how Jonathan Alfonso views properties. But a lot of my biases are baked in because I see certain things in my market. Certain things are normal to me. For example, one thing that was hilarious to watch, in the last 2 years is I've walked a lot of people from the Northeast. They're not accustomed to termites. So when we're like, hey, you need to do a termite inspection, they're like,
wait a second, why are there termites in the property?
And it was like a deal breaker for them, when in Miami, it's a very common occurrence that in the summer, you're going to have termites swarming, and you're going to have to, every couple of years, either tent or spot treat or be very on top of that. Otherwise, the problem can grow worse. Same thing with mosquitoes. If you're anywhere near where water tends to collect, you're going to have higher than usual mosquitoes, and some people tend to hedge for that. So these are things that are normal for us. And this individual, Garland, bought a house with crawl space. So now they walk into the house, they see crawl space, and apparently it all needs to be redone. Now listen, whether their inspector did a bad job or whatever it is, had this individual simply walked the property, they would have had that same feeling that they had when they said they supposedly walked in and immediately knew this home wasn't for them. That's why it's important for you to do these things. Now, I understand you're relocating, you have a lot of issues, but you need to put yourself in a position to understand what you are buying so later on you're not there. The amount of people that I saw buying sight unseen, probably less than 2%. It's just one of these things that if you're ever thinking about doing that, especially if you're gonna buy, I would recommend you absolutely do not do this. Once again, thank you for watching this video. If I could just ask you for the favor, if you all could like and subscribe down below, it's what allows us to keep amplifying our message, and we really appreciate you. Let me know, what did you think about this video? This is a little different format. I want to start commenting more on like the news that I see out there. Are you all enjoying these topics? Let me know. Once again, thank you all, and I'll get back to the video. In conclusion for this video, I just hope you all caught some of my tips on, some of the red flags that I see in this article. The main issue that I have with this article is that, listen, I understand the market is shifting. The market is now stabilizing, where we're going to more traditional markets where we're going to have one seller, one buyer. I understand the pace of transactions is going to slow, but the issue that I have with this article is, obviously if Buzzfeed, which, listen, I don't want to judge Buzzfeed because I view Buzzfeed as that establishment that I go to find out like 10 cats that can jump really high. But if they put out some sort of request for, are you upset with your home? You're obviously going to be able to find some people. But at the end of the day, let's keep this in perspective. Since, let's say, June of 2020 through June of 2022, approximately 12 million properties traded, throughout the country. So if you even get a percentage of that, you're going to have several thousand, tens of thousands that may regret their decision. Now, I take issue with the fact that they say many homeowners are going to be underwater, many homeowners this. What classifies as many? Because, for example, I've helped several hundred homeowners, and most of them are happy. We haven't had anybody come back, but it just goes to show you that you also need to avoid certain things which are red flags, like I mentioned in the video. And so, just keep that in mind when you're out there purchasing, even, in this market or whenever you're transacting in the future. So that being said, are there any crazy stories that you saw in your market? Any articles, any situations you want to bring to my attention? Please post them in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you all.